I'm going to do something a little different with this one. Normally when I do a movies that changed my life video, it's an older film that I've had more time to sit with, but this time I'm discussing a movie that came out this year. I know it probably sounds absurd. How could a movie change my life if I only saw it for the first time a few months ago? But I'm sticking by my assertion. Feel free to check back in with me a decade from now and see if I still feel the same way. I will happily admit if I'm wrong. I'm talking about Kiyotaka Oshiyama's film Look Back, based on the manga by Tatsuki Fujimoto. If you haven't seen Look Back yet, it's available to stream for free on Amazon Prime, and it's only 58 minutes long. It's my second favorite film of the year, and it's already in the Letterboxd Top 250. I'll save the spoiler talk for later in the video. I really don't want to risk spoiling this one, because there's a moment that made my jaw drop. So Look Back starts off with Fujino, who draws comics for her school newspaper. She's outgoing, popular, and everyone praises her artwork. If anything, she's a little too confident at the beginning of the film that it almost rubbed me the wrong way. But then one day her teacher asks her to share her space in the comic section of the newspaper with another student, Kyomoto, who's a truant and a recluse. Kyomoto's drawings are much more lifelike and detailed. She draws gorgeous landscapes. So Fujino's classmates make it pretty clear that they think Kyomoto is a better artist, and initially that inspires a competitive instinct in her that wasn't there before. She starts devoting all her time to becoming a better artist, to the extent that she barely sees her friends anymore. But over time, as people stop praising her artwork the way they used to, we see it kill her motivation, and she decides to stop drawing and focus on other things. There's a lot more to the story that I'll get to later, but this alone won me over because in such a short amount of time it captures how people pursue their passions and the way interactions with other people influence their motivations. When I was a kid, I used to draw for fun. Then people told me I was good at it, which made me want to draw even more. But once I had classmates who were more artistic, it made drawing less fun because it felt like I was supposed to try and be a better artist than them, and I'm not a competitive person. And when your passions become competitive, it makes them less enjoyable, especially nowadays where it feels like everyone is trying to turn their passion into some sort of side hustle because no one's jobs pay enough, so we're all just supposed to have multiple jobs in order to survive. It feels like people rarely do things out of pure enjoyment anymore. We're constantly putting pressure on ourselves to be more productive, and time is money. So if you're good at something, people will tell you that you need to monetize it. Even when people do something for fun, it feels like they're more concerned with posting that they're having a good time on social media than they are with actually having a good time. Because social media fosters this weird atmosphere where some people feel like they have to one-up others and make it seem like their lives are better. Meanwhile, I'm over here on social media openly admitting my life is in shambles. So I love how the film shows that once Fujino realizes she's never going to be the best artist, she gives up on it. That resonated with me because I'm a quitter. Because I used to draw more when I was told I was good at it, and I used to write more when I was told I was good at that. If you have a lot of self-doubt, you kind of need that validation from others. So when you're no longer receiving that validation, it's difficult to stay motivated. And when you try really hard to be the best at something, someone is always going to be better than you, and that makes it hard to stay motivated too. So when it stops being fun, it's easy to find yourself wondering, why am I doing this? What's the point? But then Fujino is tasked with bringing Kyomoto her diploma. She goes to Kiyomoto's house, but she doesn't answer the door. I wouldn't answer the door either. So she walks in and sees piles of sketchbooks, which proves that Kyomoto is just as passionate about art as she is and works just as hard, if not more so. Then she finds a slip of paper with 4 panels for a comic strip, also known as a yonkoma. So she draws a little comic that kind of pokes fun at Kyomoto for never leaving her house. This drawing ends up accidentally slipping under Kiyomoto's door and she sees it. Fujino rushes out of the house horrified, but after seeing the comic, Kyomoto realizes who she is and rushes after her. She gushes about how much she adores Fujino's comics, and it's clear that she's a really big fan and that Fujino was her inspiration to start drawing. She even asks her to autograph her jacket. Because of this praise and enthusiasm, Fujino acts like she never stopped drawing. She claims she was planning to enter a contest. This motivates her to start drawing again. I thought it was really moving to see how that enthusiasm reignited Fujino's desire to draw, because realizing you've made such a substantial impact on someone else's life is an even bigger motivator than being praised for your art. At this point, I already thought this film was brilliant for the way it depicts the complexities of artistic passions, competitiveness, and motivations. But what happens next is what solidified this as a masterpiece for me. Fujino and Kyomoto team up and submit their work to contests, with Kyomoto drawing the backgrounds of all of Fujino's comics. This blew me away because I wish more people could find ways to collaborate instead of compete with each other. Not everything needs to be a competition, and they find a way to work together that caters to both of their strengths. Kyomoto's realistic landscapes make for the perfect background art for Fujino's drawings, so together their art is even better than it was individually. They win a contest, and the manga they worked on, Shark Kick, is going going to be serialized. But Kyomoto reveals that she wants to go to art school. Fujino kind of tries to talk her out of it, but it's clear that's what Kyomoto dreams of doing. So Fujino continues working on her manga series while Kyomoto goes to art school. If you haven't seen the film yet and are still watching, here's the part where you should stop if you want to avoid spoilers, because the next part is where my jaw dropped and the film goes in a direction I never expected. If you care about avoiding spoilers, please stop watching. So Fujino hears about a murder that happened at an art school. It's ultimately confirmed that Kyomoto was one of the casualties. Then we see Fujino racked with guilt, reflecting on her time with Kyomoto and feeling like she indirectly caused her death, because if she didn't draw that silly comic that encouraged Kyomoto to leave her house, she never would have went to art school and she'd still be here. Fujino goes to Kyomoto's house and tears up that original drawing. A scrap of the comic slips under the door and basically time travels to the day when the two first met. Only this time Kyomoto sees only a fraction of the drawing and it scares her into staying in her room. This prevents the two of them from meeting, but Kyomoto still pursues her interest in art and goes to art school anyway. And I thought this was a powerful reminder that there are things you can't control. Fujino blamed herself for Kyomoto's death, but whether she met her or not, she was always going to go to art school anyway. So Fujino goes to the art school on the day of the murder and fights off the killer. So at this point, if it wasn't clear that everything happening in this sequence is a fantasy, that part makes it obvious. Kyomoto sees Fujino in the ambulance after, and that's how the two of them meet for the first time in this alternate reality. Kyomoto realizes who Fujino is and tells her she's a big fan, and Fujino says they should draw together sometime. Kyomoto goes home and draws a comic of Fujino saving her from the killer. A gust of wind blows the drawing out of her room, where it lands in front of Fujino in the original timeline, who went to Kiyomoto's house after she learned about her death. The drawing startles her, so she opens the door to Kiyomoto's room, where she sees a ton of copies of Shark Kick, and she sees the jacket that she signed for her on the day they met. And it's such a poignant sequence that quietly reveals how even though Fujino and Kyomoto went on different paths in life, Kyomoto never stopped looking up to Fujino and being her biggest fan. Fujino stopped drawing after she felt guilty over Kiyomoto's death, but then she looks back on all the memories they shared together and the positive impact her drawings had on Kyomoto. She eventually returns to drawing and tapes one of Kiyomoto's blank comic strips above her workstation as a reminder of why she's an artist. I think this movie is life-changing because in less than an hour, not only does it have so much to say about art, but it's also such a necessary reminder to look back on the positive, instead of constantly beating yourself up and wondering what if you had done things differently and blaming yourself for things that went wrong that were beyond your control. I have a tendency to replay the negative stuff in my head over and over again and reflect on how I regret the things I've done and said and how I wish I did things differently. So that's a reminder I can always benefit from. And I think this movie will be especially beneficial for anyone who's ever experienced survivor's guilt. Look Back beautifully shows there's nothing Fujino could have done to prevent Kiyomoto's death, and there's no sense in beating herself up about it and wallowing in regret, because the last thing Kiyomoto would have wanted is for Fujino to give up on her art.